This is the Fantasy Football Unlimited podcast with your host, Kevin Murray.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Unlimited podcast. On this episode, we have an amazing guest. He is quite easily one of the biggest fantasy football content creators on Instagram. From Upper Hand Fantasy, it's Faraz Siddiqi. I'm excited to have you on here, my man.
Thanks for having me, Kevin. I like I said before we started, I've seen a lot of the guys that you have on here, a lot of the guests that you've had on, some really nice people, some great names, and some people that both of us can call friends.
Yeah, there's a lot of amazing people in this industry. You've got to meet a lot of people over the years. I have too, and it's just fun to kind of help share the love and spread the resources out there in fantasy. And I love doing that. You've created a brand on Instagram that is pretty amazing. I mean, I can't go on Instagram without seeing your face. You're always on there. It's incredible what you've created. We're obviously going to get into that a little bit, but for those that are unfamiliar with your brand, with Upper Hand Fantasy, let them know what it's all about.
Yeah, I mean, we're a fantasy football media company. That's first. We created a little community over on Instagram. That's kind of how we started. And at this point, we're trying to put out content everywhere we can. We are analytics focused for the most part, but we try to entertain a little bit as well, right? Not just all the numbers, but we try to put out videos. We try to put out written pieces of content. We have we're trying to grow everywhere, wherever we can on YouTube. YouTube's our main focus this year. So we're trying to branch out a little bit, from where we're traditionally at and where our audience and community, lies mostly on Instagram. But I've met a lot of people in this industry who have been successful on a lot of other different platforms. So we're definitely, I'm definitely trying to pick some brains to figure out how we can kind of expand a little bit outside of Instagram.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely evolving. Like you said, it's a sports media company at this stage, right? You've got a team assembled. You're doing work everywhere. Cool to see where it's grown from. With the early days on Instagram, and the following you have is amazing there. But it's awesome to see that you're expanding things. This is all about. I love it. You obviously have a passion for sports, a passion for football. Did you develop a love for sports at an early age?
Yeah, I did. It's funny, man, because growing up, like that wasn't a theme in my household, right? My parents didn't really play sports, or they weren't really interested in me playing sports at all. It was more so like, hey, go get good grades, and that's all that matters, right? So when I was a kid, I did play basketball, right? I was naturally tall as a kid. I was on my elementary school basketball team, which is kind of the height of my career. And I feel like I stopped growing literally like in seventh grade. I'm probably the same height like right now as I was in seventh grade. And not sure what happened there. I thought I was trending to be like this really tall dude, but I went from like a center on my elementary school basketball team to failing to make my high school basketball team as a point guard. So that's where my career ended short. I went to high school in Brooklyn, and kids were coming into this school from all over the city. So I had no chance. I had no chance at all. But yeah, man, like I was always into the NBA. I was a pretty big Michael Jordan fan when I was a kid. That's how I got introduced to basketball. Kobe Bryant, huge. Naturally led me to watch Kobe, right? If you're watching MJ.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't really start following football though until like late in high school. When I realized like how much my older cousin loved the Jets, which was we actually don't talk anymore because I have held it against him that he made me into a Jets fan. So I will forever, hold that against him. But yeah, man, like, I joined kids in my neighborhood, playing pickup football. We'd play every single weekend, full on tackle football. So yeah, man, like, sports has been, even though it wasn't something that was a big theme in our household, it was definitely something that was a huge part of my life growing up.
That's awesome. So outside of the Jets, the Bulls, Jordan, Kobe, who were your other favorite teams and athletes growing up?
So naturally the Bulls and Lakers, right? It's random, but they were on TV a lot of the time, right? Especially on those like primary channels because they were good. And I didn't have the MSG channel early on, right? Like so I couldn't watch the Knicks. Eventually I did, and that's my team now, for basketball. But it's my responsibility as a New Yorker. Okay.
Yeah.
But then I became a big Jets fan because of my cousin in high school. And again, I blame him every day for making me a Jets fan. But yeah, still a Jets fan, to this day. But I'm really reconsidering it, to be honest.
What's the biggest loss you've experienced as a sports fan?
Jets Colts AFC Championship game. I think it was like 2009, if I'm not mistaken, with Rex Ryan. Like he took us to the championship, AFC Championship, two years in a row.
Yeah.
Mark Sanchez, right, and that team. Like the Colts. Like we lost two AFC championships in a row, but the Colts loss that first year it just hurt way more because we were up we were up at halftime in that game against Peyton Manning, and we just absolutely collapsed. Like with like a minute left in the first half, we were, I think, down by more than a touchdown. He came back, he scored a touchdown, and then that second half we just absolutely collapsed. Like we tasted victory, and as a Jets fan, you don't get that often. Okay, and we just let it slip away. Like we got revenge on them next year, in the first round of the playoffs, but still, man, it wasn't pretty. We were right there. We were on the precipice, and then it all came tumbling down after that.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't get worse than an AFC championship or an NFC championship or conference championship loss because
Yeah.
you don't expect or you don't want it to happen. You want to get to the Super Bowl. That can be pretty devastating. As a Jets fan, I mean, there's not a lot of hope. So you get a window like that, you gotta enjoy it, right? Someday,
100%.
hopefully the Jets will find a way to get to the Super Bowl and actually
That's
win.
That's what I keep telling myself.
How about an all-time favorite sports moment as a fan?
Very similar. Like the year after that, right? I think it was 2010. I think when the Jets beat the Patriots the following year in the divisional round. They were the first seed, right? We were a wild card team. They just beat us like 45-3 earlier that year. And to come out in the playoffs with a huge chip. I feel like I had a huge chip on my shoulder in that game. I wasn't even playing. I was just at the bar. Okay.
Yeah.
And that was such a good feeling. That was like David taking down Goliath. That's what it felt like. Right. And the Patriots have just been, kicking the Jets ass like every single year. Right.
Yeah.
And it's just like, this was just like the culmination of that. And we actually beat them in the playoffs. It felt really good.
Yeah. Anytime you can take down a division rival, especially a dynasty like the Patriots, I mean, I can see why that would be a big moment, big memory for you. So when did you discover fantasy sports?
Well, fantasy sports really in high school, I would say, that's, I went to high school in Brooklyn, but my friends from my neighborhood, were in some leagues. I just ended up joining my first fantasy football league from guys in the neighborhood who I actually played some, pickup football with.
That's awesome. So do you remember like way back in the day whose content you consumed?
Well, I actually didn't consume content until probably, a little bit after that. Didn't even know that it was like as big as it was, right? But I think fantasy footballers, I listened to them like, 10 years ago, whenever they started, probably more than that at this point, right? I used to listen to Sirius XM Fantasy, about, maybe 10 years ago or so, like John Hansen, some of those other guys on Sirius XM. I was also big fans of people who use good data, right, to steer their fantasy football opinions. So like guys like Scott Barrett, Graham Barfield, like those guys were awesome, right? And like I just consume their stuff on Twitter and like their articles and that sort of thing. And it's really weird like having met all those guys now at this point. Like people that used to like can just consume their content just like 10 years ago, and now you kind of know who they are and they know who you are. It's kind of weird.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, they're colleagues, right? At this stage, I think that's awesome. So when you first started to really like enjoy fantasy football, fantasy sports, what was it that hooked you? What did you like about it?
I think it's just an excuse to get together, with people that you like. Hopefully, that you like. I think we should use any excuse to just do that, just in life in general. So yeah, and it's a reason you to continue to communicate and have fun with your friends over something that doesn't really matter that much, right? It's fantasy football. It's not real. It's just fun. But I think it brings people together. It provides like a sense of ownership over something that you can somewhat control, right? Get some satisfaction from crafting it in a way that helps you win something, trying to win something. I think that competitiveness is like a part of what we all like to do. Especially if you play sports and then you were never good enough to make it in any sort of competitive level, including your high school basketball team. This kind of fills that void a little bit,
Certainly, certainly. Yeah, it's people that you like and people that you like beating, right, in a competition, right?
100%.
So, do you have a primary league, like a league that is your main league?
Yeah, yeah. Our home leagues have evolved like over the years. But yeah, like we have our home league and that's evolved. But like those are always my favorite ones, just because like it's with people that you want to beat really badly, right?
Yeah,
And you want to talk smack to, right? And it's not like, you know, I'm in a lot of leagues, but it's always that one. And also for whatever reason, you know, those are always the most competitive too. Even
yeah.
though they're not putting out content, even though they're not analysts, it doesn't matter. Like I don't necessarily have a huge advantage over them. Like they're sharp. Like they know what they're doing, and I just enjoy. It's competitive. We talk the most smack of any of our leagues. We get together for a draft, right? Like you can't really ask for more.
Yeah, yeah, live drafts. I mean, that really makes a league special, and you can combine that with like a home league where it's your people. Nothing's better than that. Like from my experience, I mean, that's what this is all about for me. Is
Right,
just the
100%.
I love the league experience, and so if you can get that live draft, it just makes a league more special. So you guys have been doing live drafts for many years.
Oh yeah, for years, man, for years, and you know, obviously it's evolved. People have come in and out, you know, but for the most part, it's mostly you know people who are in my life, and it's been awesome. But yeah, no, we try to do live drafts as often as possible, and we create incentives around like you being at the live draft. So it's fun, man.
That's always good. Any good traditions at your drafts, like locations or festivities wrapped around that draft?
Well, you know, back in the day, we used to like make sure that you know whoever's at the live draft ends up being the person who, you know, they end up being least likely to have to get extra draws within the league punishment type of thing, and we'll kind of
Yeah.
like tie it to that. But yeah, like we every single year we try to create new types of punishments and make sure that we do it like during the before the draft, because after the draft, if you don't like your team, you're much less likely to agree to a punishment that isn't so great on paper.
That's true. And doing that kind of thing before the season gets started is a great way to kind of ramp up the excitement
Oh yeah.
for a league. I love it. Who's your
Oh yeah.
biggest rival in fantasy when it comes to like either your home leagues or industry leagues? Who's the person that you want to beat the most, and who's the person you don't want to lose to the most?
I have a buddy, you know, in my home league. His name is Hummy. We've been friends since we were kids, and I think both of us get a little extra satisfaction when we're able to take down the other person. You know, like no doubt about it. In the playoffs, especially. You know, we always, you know, more years than not, like we ended up seeing each other in the playoffs, and it gets nasty. It
I
gets
love it.
nasty.
I love fantasy football home league rivals, right? It seems like you always
100%.
end up meeting, right? Everyone's got their rival. Everyone's got their hummy. I love that.
Love it.
Do you have favorite settings, favorite formats in fantasy?
Yeah, I do love Dynasty, but I think redraft is my favorite format. You know, I like the reset of it all. Like I like the extra chances you can take, and I like the diversification of players across different leagues that I could do every year, because you know I do so much analysis throughout the off season, right? That I kind of want to apply it right as much as I can, right? And I can play best ball and stuff like that too, but you know, 99% of the time, like I won't join a league with a kicker, and 90% of the time I won't join the league with the defense. You know, but you know, give me an extra wide receiver spot, give me an extra flex spot or two, and we're cooking.
I love that, and I love having like different leagues. Whether it's redraft, dynasty, best ball, just a variety too, because it helps kind of keep things fresh, right? And as opposed to having a bunch of leagues with exact same settings. That's when fantasy can get a little bit much, right? You got everybody's going against each other. All your players on one team facing you in another league. But when you can mix it up with formats, it definitely can make it a little more doable when it comes to just putting everything you can into a league.
For sure.
So when did you officially start creating content, and what was your inspiration behind that?
Um, it was around 2017, maybe something like that. Well, 7 years ago. That's kind of crazy. I knew I wanted to get into business. I think I knew. Like I wasn't sure what that looked like though, you know, and I was always interested in that entrepreneurship path, and I didn't really know how to get into it. I didn't know what to do. It's not like I was really focused on finding that path. It was more so like I just knew I was interested in it.
Mhm.
And I just didn't know how to manifest that, right? I didn't know how or what any of that was. And then I stumbled on Gary Vee's content around that time, 2016, 2017. He also had a book called Crush It. And the main concept for what he was saying overall at that time was make content around your niche, and he talked about how to do it, talked about how to, what platforms to do it on, right? And at the time, Instagram was big, right? And I just followed the basic principles that he laid out in terms of like the mindset around creating content and what to do around that. So I credit him a ton for giving me like that real direction that I didn't have in the beginning.
And he's a Jets fan, right? So
Yes.
you trusted him.
Oh, 100%. I mean, the Jets fan part about it was a big factor. No doubt. He understood the struggle,
Yeah, yeah. So what were you doing at this, like, I guess professionally? What were you doing at that time when you decided to dive into doing more fantasy?
Oh, I graduated college. I was a software engineer. I had a pretty good job, and I was was I married at the time? Yeah, I was married. I just had my first kid in 2016. And yeah, like that was kind of it. And I knew I was actually putting out content here and there, like, random stuff that I was into, right? And fantasy football wasn't necessarily like this huge passion of mine, right? I love doing it. It was part of my life, and I just figured that, well, you know what? Like, I'm already doing it. Let me see if I could put some content around this and see if that works, right? It was just more of an experiment. And then it ended up, picking up a little steam.
And it's amazing with the Instagram thing because so much of the fantasy community kind of lives on Twitter or X these days, but all over these years, whereas there wasn't a huge presence on Instagram. I guess it was his own presence, right? There's a lot of content creators that just have been over there. It's like two different worlds. And so the way that you were able to kind of capture in the moment what was relevant with content, like being on Instagram, as opposed to just spending all your time on Twitter, but actually growing a community over there. Like, brilliant. Looking back on it, I mean, obviously brilliant. I don't know if at that time that's exactly what your goal was, but it obviously it paid off because you're following on Instagram it's incredible. Like, it's really special.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate that. But I think I didn't have these like crazy lofty goals or anything, in the beginning. And also like all I really cared about was building a community. And all I really cared about was the audience, right? So, and I realized from the in the beginning that, what, like, I'm not sure how much of the audience is going to be on Twitter. Like, I know that the community is on Twitter. I know that other analysts are on Twitter, and I know that a lot of other important um, people in the community and the industry are on Twitter. And that's why I always found that important as well. But I thought that, the community, the audience, and eventually the customers, I thought I could build something nice on Instagram. And I think once I started building a little momentum, I thought that I should, continue doing that because, it's that, Kevin Kelly, 1000 true fans model, right? Where, you kind of like make sure that you have those people who are willing to, you know, put money where they think that they could get some value, right? And those are the people that are going to be with you for life, right? As long as you continue to do right by them. And yeah, like Instagram has really helped me out in that sense. But again, we're talking one platform here, right? And it's important, I think, to not be so dependent on one platform, and that's something that I'm fully aware of. And we got so big on there, but at the same time, Instagram, like, look what just happened. Look what's going on with TikTok right now, right?
Yeah.
TikTok, is going through some legislation issues. And what if, your presence is just on TikTok, and then all of a sudden your whole audience goes to zero because of that, right? So I think it's important to make sure that you're not just locked onto one platform.
And focus on that community because they'll follow you right around to wherever
Yeah,
you're at, right?
that's the hope. Yeah, that's the hope.
I just spoke with Ray Garvin from Destination Devi just recently, and that was one of the biggest things that he emphasized was his focus on the community, because that's the community that he's built at Destination Devi. anything on the outside of that like doesn't matter nearly as much as that. And so, understanding the importance of building a community, focusing on the people that are supporting you, it obviously it pays off. It pays off for sure. So
100%. And I think Ray is on the money with, and me and him talked about this before, and I think me and him are on the same page about that. It's when in doubt, focus on your community.
clearly, that's a great lesson right there. So from day one until till now, you've done a lot of work with collaborating with other brands and companies and whatnot. Talk to me about some of the highlights during your journey.
Yeah, I think, in the beginning, we were putting out as much content as we can in the beginning. I was trying to put out like at least a post a day, and we started getting a little traction. It's like, people started commenting like, "Okay, I think I got something here," right? And you kind of keep going throughout the years and keep posting. And, I think, eventually you hit a collaboration and somebody likes your content that has a huge following, and you're like, "Oh, well, if we can collaborate, that'll be amazing." And you do that, and then people are more aware of what you're doing, right? And you kind of do that over and over again, right, in iterations. And one thing for me, it's like, a huge thing can happen, right, for me, um, by a lot of people's standards. But I always look at every, big or small, it's all one brick. You lay one brick, move on to the next, move on to the next, right? I never try to get too high on, a really, really great opportunity or a really amazing thing that happened, right? Like, if I had a, if I just met with one of the fantasy footballers or Matthew Berry or something like that, like, excuse me, it's an amazing thing, right? Like objectively, it's like, holy, like this is not something that I would have seen coming. But at the end of the day, if you're building something, you're trying to build something special, you got to keep going and just keep building more bricks, right? So that's what we've been doing. I think, um, when we hit, six figures in revenue, I think that was, one of our biggest milestones. I think when that happened, I'm like, okay, this is this is going to be something real, and we're going to continue to build. We're going to try to continue to invest in the company, reinvest, right, and try our best to continue to do what we're doing. We had a partnership with Underdog. We were part of their incubator program 2 years ago. That was extremely helpful because they guided us through a lot of stuff, and they helped us out with a lot as well. Um, and now we're back with Underdog on another multi-year agreement, which is amazing. So we're at a point now where we're building the business, and we've had a lot of great moments along the way, right? It's just, again, like, I look at all of these things, big or small, just as bricks, and relationships are super important, right? And me personally, like everybody that I meet, I just want to make sure that they know that I want to help them, right? Genuinely. And I think I believe that relationships are long term, and just continue to build and continue to build relationships.
It's awesome. Are you surprised by the growth that you've seen with your content?
Um, I don't think so. I mean, I'm also not saying that I knew where I'd be at right now. I think where we're at makes sense, based on the work that was involved. It also makes sense with how much you know work we put over the past several years, the moves that we made, but also the luck that we had, right? Like, I think luck is a big part of it too. But it's all about just making sure that, like, when that luck presents itself, you better be ready, right? So, like, I think
Yeah.
that's really what it comes down to.
Timing, right? Luck, well, yeah, it's timing,
Of
right?
course,
Timing,
it's all
right
timing.
place, right time for sure. And
Hmm.
making things happen when it comes to connections and relationships, right? It's not
Yes.
like it just, things randomly happen to you, but you put yourself in those positions and you've clearly done a great job with putting yourself in the right spot. What have been the biggest challenges that you faced thus far?
I think I'm still, still working on it. It's creating an ideal product for our audience. I think, not being as beholden to advertisers and brand deals and sponsorships, but more so around building good products for our community. And we're continuing to iterate around that. We're continuing to try and build and test and see what our audience likes, and continue doing that. But that's definitely our biggest challenge, because once you have a good product, then it's just more about how many people can know about that product, right? It becomes a marketing effort at that point. But I think, before that, you got to make sure that your product is awesome and amazing.
For sure. And talk to me about like building a team. Obviously, you've brought on content creators to kind of help help things out. Talk to me about building a team and the people you've been able to work with.
Yeah, I think one of the first things that I had to do was bring on someone who helps with graphic design, right? On Instagram especially, right? Because it's a very visual platform. In the beginning, I was creating everything by myself, like on Canva and on these like apps on my phone, and super rudimentary and elementary type of like graphics, right? With like a player with a blurry background and like some text, right? And then like my caption would be like 8 paragraphs long on Instagram. So imagine reading that. Like no one ever does that anymore.
Yeah.
So now, we focus on Instagram carousels, right? And we have, easy to explain type of posts, right? So we've kind of morphed our content throughout the years based on what the platform likes, right? And the longer you keep users on the platform, the better, which is why something like carousels work, because they're interacting with your post multiple times in one shot, and they're staying on the platform as long as possible. So the graphic design was a huge one. My guy Zach has been with me for several years now. He's our lead guy, and we're trying to bring on a couple more graphic designers to work under him. We've had guys come in and out, but no one really permanently on the team as of right now. And then our video, our video editing team has been obviously huge as well. You've obviously, you said you can't open up Instagram without seeing my face, but without those guys, like I wouldn't be able to make it happen, right? They super quick with it. Like we have a little bit of a I guess system now, right? Where we'll record, my editing team grabs the raw footage and they'll pump out reels for me, pump out short video content. We're working on YouTube. Obviously, we have those going up, the long form podcasts and stuff like that going up on YouTube. And they edit those videos as well. So, and same thing with our podcast, right? We have a podcast producer who goes through all the podcast stuff, helps out with some social media. So we have a few people there. We want to grow the team as much as we can, and try to like, we also have somebody working on the website as well. So, a back end website person who also kind of puts in content here and there on the side. But that's kind of what the team looks like right now. Those are like the main elements of it. But I think that's kind of the basics, right now. Obviously, I'm running the business side, but I'm also like very knee deep in the content as well. I love doing it. It's one of my favorite things to do, like analyzing like all these free agents going everywhere, these rookies coming in. I love it. Like I really do. It's fun, especially the rookie stuff. It's really, really fun to me, kind of projecting these guys going into the NFL. But at the same time, the business as it grows, it's just demanding so much more of my time.
Sure.
So we have to start really making sure that like, all right, we have other people in place to take some of that work off of my plate.
Perfect. It sounds like a perfect plan. I love it. Got to just scale it from here. What are the biggest lessons you've learned during your journey? Whether, I guess from an analyst perspective, the evolution of how you see the game, and then also from an entrepreneurial perspective. Obviously, it's a huge part of your world.
I just have to keep growing. I have to keep learning. No more ball than I did the year before, right? As an analyst, right? Like the content has to evolve. The analytical skills have to evolve. My understanding of film has to evolve every single year. And I had to film those gaps, right? And I had to replace some old ideas with new ideas, right? And keep evolving that. Like I don't want to believe all the same things that I believed last year at this time, right? And that's just from an analyst perspective, content creator perspective. And then on the business side, I think learning from other industries and then applying those ideas and principles into our industry is where I've seen the most success. And just understanding successful journeys and best practices across industries is a big advantage. But again, similar thing, right? Just keep iterating and keep learning.
And that makes a lot of sense too. I think a lot of people, it's easy to kind of get stuck, like fantasy football content creators within the industry, looking at what other people are doing, as opposed to looking on the outside and maybe bringing in something from the outside world to kind of create, something new within fantasy. So look on the outside is a huge, great way to kind of differentiate yourself, right? Bring something new to the table, be a little bit different. I love that. I love that mindset. Let's talk about the fantasy football community, right? The support that you've gotten from others within the community. What has that meant to you over the years?
It's meant a lot. Honestly, I was somebody who was kind of on the outside, right, in terms of the fantasy football community for a long time. right? I was on Instagram, and most of the community, like you said earlier, lives on Twitter, right? They all know each other from Twitter, right? When they see each other in person in real life, they know each other from Twitter. So I really had to, you know, be, kind of like make sure that and I was never really desperate to make sure that people knew who I was from the industry. But at the end of the day, yeah, and I've seen we've seen each other so many times at a lot of these events, right? The Expo or FSGA, right? And I make sure that I go there and I meet everybody and I learn about what everyone has going on. And I make sure when I see people that I know who I either respected for a long time or I knew for a long time or I just recognized, like I make sure to go up to them and let them know, like, yo, like I have messed with your content for a long time, or I really respect, what you're doing or whatever, right? And I think going in it from that perspective, it really makes a difference because like I'm just letting my guard down. In these type of environments, I'm just myself. But at the end of the day, over the years, from people who got to know me and got to know what we're doing and our content as well, the support is unbelievable, man. Like I have nothing but amazing things to say about the support that people have shown me personally. Um, like it's a 10 out of 10, right? I have nothing bad to say. It's amazing. And I always come back from these events like FSGA and stuff like that. And I talk to my wife for like hours about all of the people that I met, all of the support that I'm getting. And it's I have nothing but good things to say. It's amazing.
How about the FSGA experience as like an independent, content creator? It's a little different. I understand going there and kind of being on that side of things. It's different to go there from that perspective. What has that experience been like for you at FSGA?
FSG is the best because I get to meet potential sponsors, for the brand. I get to meet potential collaborators for the brand, right? Like I'm not the thing is like I'm not working for any particular company, whereas I'll be kind of hamstrung in terms of making more moves with people who are there, right? So these relationships that I'm building at FSGA on the business side can go a long way, right? And I always look at these relationships as long-term relationships where things we might not be able to work together right now, but 2 years down the line, you have an idea you need somebody to help out with or whatever. I'm hoping that my name comes to mind, right? And I think that's kind of how I deal with it, and I deal with the FSGA more so from a business perspective than a content creation perspective. But at the end of the day, a lot of the value that we bring as a business is the type of content that we put out, the high production value and our audience and all of that. So it's a multi-layered type of thing, and I can have a lot of different types of conversations at an event like that.
Yeah. Now, obviously, I think a lot of people, you know, again, from like the kind of content creation world, it's an expensive event, membership, and it's just expensive. Like it kind of gets in the way of more people diving into that event. What would you say to those people that kind of are on the fence about like is it worth it?
Well, it really depends what your goals are, to be honest. And I don't think the event is for everybody, right? And I think if you're an individual content creator, I don't think that event is worth the money. I don't. Um, However, I think that, I think still being able to network with other content creators, network with, other companies and things like that is worth it. For us, like, we're a business, like we can afford, it's not my money, right? It's my company's money, right? That we're spending here to like make it to these events. And we look at it as a real investment that turns into real dollars, opposed to, if you're an individual content creator, it might not be the time yet, right? But still, go to make sure you go to the expo, right? That's super affordable, right? There are other events that you could end up going to and taking advantage of, where I think it might be more worth your time. But it also depends on what your goals are, right? If your goals are, to create a business, or if your goals are to make sure that you meet a lot of these decision makers who will be bringing content creators in, those people are at FSGA, right? So it could be worth it. But yeah, no, I agree. I mean, that price point, it is definitely a little high. But I would say that if you can make it, if you can afford it, it can be worth it depending on what your goals are.
Yeah, I definitely recommend it. But yeah, you're right. Other events, Scott Fishbowl live events have become
Oh
these
yeah,
mini
love it.
networking events that are just amazing. And obviously, the expo is fantastic. Are you going to be at the expo this year?
Yes, yes. Last year I couldn't make it because my wife and I had a trip to Italy last year, so it was literally right that during that same time. But this year we're not going on vacation during that week, so I'll definitely be there for sure.
Outstanding. So when it comes to the actual game of football, we haven't got the draft ahead of us. It's an exciting time of year, such a fun time of year. Are there any players in this upcoming draft that you can't wait to see where they land? Like a quarterback, a running back, wide receiver, tight end, just in this draft class?
Yeah, I mean, I really want to see where Jaden Daniel lands because, like, very possible, like, that he's just this cheat code for fantasy, right? Like, with his legs and all that, he could be that next guy, right? We only have a handful of those type of guys, right? Who
Yeah.
can be dynamic in the pass and the run game, right? So I'm really looking forward to seeing what he can do and where he goes, and hopefully he ends up being a legit NFL player. At running back, I think as of right now, we're still kind of going through the evaluation process, but Jonathan Brooks is probably my favorite running back in this draft class. Trey Benson, I think, is a close second. If Jonathan Brooks wasn't if he didn't tear his ACL last year, I think he would have been my clear, like, RB1, no
Yeah.
question. And we'll see if he ends up getting a big workload in the NFL, right? He's not, like, the biggest guy, but, like,
Mm.
I kind of look at him like a little Tony Pollard, type of guy. There's somebody who, had his pro day yesterday, Lad McConkey, out of Georgia, wide receiver. Saw him at the Senior Bowl, met him, and he seems like a great guy. And he has serious game, man. He got some real game in him. So he could end up sneaking his way into the late first round. That'd be awesome to see. But yeah, like, I think those guys, I'm pretty excited to see where they land in the NFL.
Any wild cards, like just deeper sleepers in the draft class that you just are really curious about?
Yeah, man. Isaac Gorendo,
Mhm.
Louisville. He's a running back from Louisville. He had a fast 40, and a lot of people didn't even know who he was until the combine because he ended up putting up some pretty big numbers.
Yeah.
But he's somebody who, for me personally, like, I was already paying attention because yards after contact was up there. He kind of shined in multiple metrics, even kind of efficient in the receiving game too. So I'm interested to see, like, where he lands and if he gets some initial opportunity. Unfortunately, I don't think he's gonna, make it to day 2 or anything like that. He'll probably end up being like a later day 3 pick, but still, like, you never know with those guys.
And the right fit, the landing spot can change everything for a guy like that. And truly, I mean,
Oh yeah,
truly a special athlete. That's pretty clear with his combine.
for sure.
Do you have any like my guys, just traditional redraft that you can't wait to acquire that you'll jump ADP for in 2024?
I this could be complete recency bias, okay, Kevin, but Drake London, like, I'm gonna bet that he's a wide receiver 1 this year pretty
Yeah.
easily. Like, I'm not sure what his ADP is gonna turn into. We'll see. We'll see, like, what that hype train looks like, but I think it's gonna be severe. I think I'm not sure if I'm gonna have to jump ADP. It might just happen. But I will be willing to bet that if he ends up, like, being drafted outside, like, the top 10, I might put him in that top 10, to be honest with you. I think Brees Hall, him too. Like, he's gonna have a monster season. I think he's already gonna be a first round pick. I'm willing to take him in the top half of the first round, but, like, he's somebody that I just know I just have a feeling that he's just gonna go crazy this year. Couple other guys later. I would say Trey McBride, really big on him. I think he could be tight end 1 this year. You don't have to draft him at a tight end 1 price. And then Deontay Johnson is somebody who just got traded to Carolina. I think people are going to be very, very low on him. And I think just general consensus already was very low on him, even as a player. And I just wholeheartedly disagree with that. So I think he's somebody that could be a big value this year. So I can see him being on a lot of my teams.
Yeah, that's a great point. Is a guy like that, the volume's going to be there for
No doubt.
Johnson. You would imagine, but then also great points with the other guys. I mean, I think that London is in such a great spot. He's so talented. You got Bijan to kind of carry the load, and then with an actual quarterback behind the center, I don't think Cousins is going to be out of this world, but he is that steady quarterback that Drake London needs.
Exactly.
It's a great suggestion, and I do love looking at when it comes to rankings and looking at the upcoming season. To ponder who are going to be the top players in 2025, right? The
Yeah.
next year. And Brees Hall, like, I mean, I think he's 101, right? In 2025, I think he is the first player taken off the board. So
Exactly.
I do also expect a big 2024 for him.
Yeah, we're on the
Let's
same page about
Yeah,
that.
I mean, I just 2025, man, he's 101. So
Yeah, I'm
let's
with
dive
you.
into some rapid fire questions. I'll just throw out some questions. Just let me know what first comes to mind. The answers don't necessarily have to be rapid, but whatever comes to mind.
Sure.
What do you enjoy most about what you're doing in the industry right now?
Building the business. It's like it's a game to me. It's fun. I love the people that I meet along the way. Whether they're in the industry or in our community. So, but I think it's building the business.
That's great. What are your favorite activities and hobbies outside of sports?
In the wintertime, I like snowboarding. I wish it's weird because I used to look forward to the spring so much, but I actually wish this weekend was like that last winter weekend that I could have snowboarded, but it's not. It's spring. It's going to be 70 degrees here today in New Jersey, so it is what it is. Listen, I'm happy about that too. It's so weird. I'm just hearing myself complain about that, which is hilarious. I also I do like to travel as well. I just talked about my wife and I, we travel a ton, and she's my favorite travel partner. But we do quite a bit of that, especially together, just us. We do some friends trips as well. I also have 2 kids; they take up a ton of my time. Um, we go on trips together too, and all that. But yeah, like it's like fantasy, family. That's really it, man. There's not much else going on.
There's only so much room, right? That's a good balance right there. Do you have an all-time favorite TV show?
All-time favorite TV show. I would probably say, as an adult, Game of Thrones, and then as a kid, Fresh Prince.
Yeah, that's a good combination. I like that. How about an all-time favorite movie?
Movie. I would say, again, opposite ends of the spectrum. I would say like I'm a big fan of comedies, and I would say super bad. But then like another movie that came into my head was Dark Knight. So like those two, like opposite ends of the spectrum, but those are 2 of my favorites.
I like the idea of throwing out two because there's so many different categories. So I,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
definitely respect the answers on that. How about a sports movie? Another category.
Sports movie. Not football movie, huh? Sports movie.
Any sport. Any
I would
sport.
probably go with Rocky.
Okay.
I'm gonna go with Rocky. Rocky 1.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean the OG. I love that.
The
How about
OG.
a favorite band, singer, artist, musician?
Currently, I would say Drake, Bad Bunny, and then growing up, it was definitely Jay-Z.
Okay. 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 Do you have favorite podcasts outside of sports? Do you listen to podcasts outside of
Uh,
sports?
I listen to so many podcasts, Kevin, like so many. Let's see. Probably Alex Hermosi's podcast, whatever it's called, The Game. I think that's what it's called. There's so many. Can I just pull? Can I pull this up real quick? I
Let's
can tell
do
you
it. Let's do it. Yeah.
exactly like what I'm subscribed to. So here we go. So the Diary of a CEO is amazing. It's a great show. Modern Wisdom, How I Built This. Listen to Joe Rogan here and there, but The Future with Chris Do is a great business podcast. School of Greatness with Lewis Howes and Alex Hormozzi's podcast. So all of this stuff, it's like you never know which guests are going to be where and all that. And
Yeah.
again, this is the type of stuff that I was talking about in terms of like learning from other industries
Hmm.
and being able to apply it. I think it's huge.
Yeah, obviously, the more open-minded you are to the outside world, it sounds like you're getting a lot of different information. That's the best way to grow. Obviously, it's an outstanding way to grow. Are you just basically like listening all day long? You got something planned?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I'm doing mundane stuff, like I can't listen and like work at the same time. But if I'm like making breakfast, or if I'm making a meal, or if I'm doing laundry, literally have my phone next to me at all times playing a podcast. And it
Good.
depends on the type of mood I'm in. Like sometimes I'll play some like I don't always have to be listening to like a business podcast, but I would say like 70% of the time I am.
Nice,
Or
nice.
something on Audible, right? Like either one.
Yeah, yeah. What are you most grateful for at this time?
What am I most grateful for? I mean, I'm healthy, physically, mentally. My family's healthy. I'm spending my time doing what I want to do. Can't ask for more than that, I think.
No, you can't. Now you've obviously done a fantastic job growing the brand. It keeps going, it keeps going. But there's obviously been some people that have impacted you along the way. Can you name some of the people that have had a huge influence on you during your journey?
I would say, just watching what the fantasy footballers have done, kind of just setting those heights really, really high, right? In terms of business, in terms of content, doing it the right way. Um, and I mentioned Scott Barrett and Graham Barfield earlier, like they showed me the type of analysis that I try to kind of get me going a little bit, right? That helped me out a ton. And then Dwayne McFarland took it from there and still continues to do it. So I think, he continues to kind of lead the way in that category.
Now I had Lawrence Jackson on here, you know, several months ago at this point, but he said that you were a guy that had a huge influence on him. You know, where the way you guys kind of found each other, kind of on the rise up. And so I just wanted to let you know about that.
Well, that's awesome to hear, man. Like Lawrence is a great guy. I'm really glad that I was, even a little part of his journey because I feel like he would have done his thing regardless of whether I was in his life or not. He knows what he's doing. He's a great guy. He knows how to build relationships, and he's just a great person. If you get to know Lawrence, he's just a Lord don't lose on Twitter. He's a great human being. So I'm really really happy that he would put my name up there, as the answer to this question.
Yeah, no, he's incredible. Now, obviously, you've created this path. It's been fun for me to see kind of the outside. There's a lot of people that want to get more involved in fantasy, start creating content, or are creating content and just want to grow. What advice do you have for people that want to follow that path?
I would say, if your goal, it depends on what your goal is, obviously, right? Let's say your goal is just to create content. That would be my advice, to create content. And I think I would create content on your own, right? First, right? On social media, test what works, test what doesn't, try to build your own community, try to create your own following. Because when you do that, you're creating your own leverage, right? And then the way that you'll get the best opportunities, and not just any opportunity that you need to pick up, if you want to work for other companies or if you want to create your own as a solo creator, I think regardless, building your own audience a little bit, building your own community, building your own following, I think helps that leverage point, right? And it helps no matter what, whether you want to work for another company or whether you want to do your own thing. Because if even when you work with another company, that company is going to have to acknowledge the fact that you're probably bringing over a lot of your own following, right? When Fantasy Life brings over Dwayne McFarland and Ian Harditz, right? They are definitely like, letting like understanding that they're bringing their audiences over as well, right? When Scott Barrett and Graham Barfield, whenever they go wherever they're going, fantasypoints.com, like, when they're bringing, John Hanson's bringing those guys over, like they know what's up. Obviously Barrett is a co-owner there, but he was able to do that because he's built his own leverage, right? And he's built a leverage while he was at companies, but he was doing things independently as well. And I think doing things independently, it makes a big difference. And I think that building that leverage is important, I would say, and not just, you know, I think some of the worst opportunities are for the people who don't necessarily have the most leverage. And in order to have the most leverage, you kind of have to have, a little bit of a portfolio, you could say, right? If you want to put it in other words.
That's great. Great advice for sure. What does the future hold for Upper Hand Fantasy?
Just to continue to grow, man, like, continue to grow on other platforms, continue to build our podcast, continue to build our newsletter, obviously foster the community that we already have on Instagram, build some more products. And just, the more we can grow, the more we can serve and the more we can help. And, we just love what we're doing right now. So we just want to do more of it.
I love it. I love it. For us, absolutely thrilled to have you on here. Is there anything that you want to share before we close things out here?
No, I don't think so, man. Just really, really appreciate you having me on. I've seen the names that have been on this show, and I'm just really, thankful to be a part of it.
Boy, you certainly belong on this list. Can you share with the listeners, viewers, where to find you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram at Upper Hand Fantasy. You can find us on the Upper Hand Fantasy podcast as well. I think those two are the main things that you can look at.
There we go. Thank you so much for joining me. It was an absolute thrill to have you on here, my man. I can't wait to see what's next for you in 2024 and see you in Canton, Ohio at the Fantasy Football Expo.
100%. Thanks a lot, man.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Football Unlimited podcast. Until next time, be sure to follow and subscribe to all of FFU's social media accounts for daily content.